start with an introduction, maybe?
Sure.
And
I'm Tate Mosesian, studio art director on the project.
And I'm Eugene Elkin, and I'm the game director and the lead engineer on the project.
So, VR games have always had a problem kind of fixing like the first-person movement problem, so it feels natural. What method did you select in this game, and why did you choose that?
So we've been in VR for over a decade now, and we've been in since the very first days where just moving makes you feel nauseous, and the industry evolved as a whole in terms of what the standard of locomotion is these days. It used to be only teleportation, otherwise it's nauseous. When we figure out there's certain ramp up in the acceleration and ramp down that actually doesn't make the person nauseous. But we also have comfort options. So if you don't like turning smooth turn with a joystick, then we have snap turn, or instantly snapshot. We do vignettes, so if you start moving faster, then there is a post-process effect that kicks in inside the screen that almost gives you binocular vision, almost tunnel vision, and because you're not getting this fast movement in the peripheral vision, then the nausea is decreased. So we are using the standard locomotion, but there's a lot of tricks in the back end that go there to decrease that whole feeling you might get from nausea.
So with a lot of games, rumble is always the big thing, the rumble effect in the controllers. Now haptic feedback's the big play. Can you talk about how those perhaps work into the game?
Haptics is crucial, especially firing the gun and in VR when you have so much physicality with what you touch. Even opening the doors, it's not hit E in your keyboard, and it should come up and there's a lever that you grab and you pull down, and everything should have a feel to it. Because that physical interaction with it is just another dimension in the game that, okay, this is real. It's not just I feel it, I don't just see it in a game. Just about everything has haptics. Obviously the controllers and haptics have also improved in the VR, but PSVR actually has had haptics. And at certain moments when I don't want to spoil it for you, I'll just say when you get hit and you feel it in your head, that's just another level of immersion that you feel connected to the game.
All right. Thank you.
Is there anything you added to the game that, like Easter egg wise, or just something like where players that are fans of the franchise, while they're playing, like, oh, I remember this in from the movie?
Yeah, from a visual standpoint, that I'm saying this a lot today, is we really were interested in being authentic to the 1986 film, and so you're going to see a lot of things in there that will draw you back to that time period, that space. We're not recreating Hadley's Hope, event by event, but we are creating worlds that look like they could have been on a neighboring planet. And so you're getting that Aliens experience. You are going to get to see a lot of the iconic stuff that you would see there, the equipment, the creatures, but you're also going to be immersed in a world that you haven't seen yet, but that is in tune with what you have.
If you're a fan of the franchise, you will definitely be pointing and giggling quite a bit, and if you're a newcomer, you'll enjoy it just the same. It's this action and horror mix that's just perfectly built for VR, and it's a game from the ground up built for VR experience.
What was the first concept or technique for the game that immediately excited you when you learned you were working on an Alien VR game?
It's the opportunity to work with, I think, one of the most unique AI in gaming. Traditionally, difficulty and the way you play it can be scaled with a biped character, like a humanoid character, because they can shoot, they can run up there, they can lock doors, they can open doors, they can take over, there's so much they can do. But we have this creature that's able to climb on anything, walk on anything, can be on a wall, perch in this little hole inside the wires. But in the end, all it can do is nail it. And it's this perfect killing organism, and yet we need a mixture of, okay, it's an action game, it's not just horror game, you're not just running away from it, you gotta fight this thing. So there's a technical challenge, because we needed to stay authentic. The first thing, we set a couple of ground rules when we started iterating in the game, and one was authentic alien combat and respect the Zenos. So the moment you don't respect it, the moment you your head is not in a swivel and not using a motion tracker to analyze, hey, did I just hear something tucked behind the walls? And you don't take out the motion tracker, you're not being careful. You might just get got.
So you're asking an artist how they felt when they found out they were going to work on an Aliens project. H.R. Geiger, Ron Cobb, Sid Mead. That's enough right there. And really, they provided the framework, the blueprint, everything we needed to interject into this game. And that was the Bible. That was what we followed.
So you mentioned your sources of inspiration for the look of the game. How much freedom did you have in that, drawing that? Does having the franchise IP, were they really protective and say, no, we can't do that, or did they let you kind of go?
They were accommodating, and we sort of tried a few things and pushed and pulled in different directions. Ultimately, we just ended up coming back to the Xenomorph Warrior and really held true to that. And so any feedback that came back from Disney was really there to kind of help out. If there was something we missed and they caught, great, thank you. So it wasn't really an adversarial relationship, it was really a collaborative one, because we were all in sync with what we wanted to do with the project. Now, where we were able to branch out a little bit was within the environments, and Disney and 20th Century have been really good about letting us do that as long as we remain in the sort of core visual rules and maintain the aesthetic that it wouldn't be confusing to the player what world am I in? And we've been constantly getting feedback from people saying, even just dropping into a corridor, I knew immediately what game I was playing, I knew what movie it was from, and that was just in an empty corridor. So then we knew we were successful, and then we were giving the IP holder what they wanted to.
Now, you guys have been doing the VR stuff for a long time. Obviously, it was purpose-built for VR. What were some of the challenges, or were the things in particular that were even more difficult with this title than maybe some titles you guys have done in the past, as far as the VR landscape is concerned?
This is our most narrative-driven game. We've already done with Survios. It's, the previous title we did was Creed, and the narrative is told much simpler. It is, you're in the ring, you got a train, and there's just a person speaking to you, right? In here, we needed something much more elaborate because the story is much more complex. We've taken such great care of creating this really interesting story that we want to take the person through it. And while you can't really do cutscenes in VR in a traditional sense, because you can't take away control of the camera from the player, because the player needs to be able to rotate their head, and we wanted to create some really enticing moments, something disempowers the player and is able to tell the story as what's happening. So there's lots and lots of engineering work and animation work and prototyping that went in. How can we give you head movement and yet take away control of your arms? And all of a sudden your arms can do something else, but maybe you have a little control of your arms. That way you could be, let's say, strapped to a chair, because that's necessary for the narrative moment.
And we talked about Xeno traversal. Really, on the art side, the challenge is to create environments that the Xenos can actually traverse. And they're fairly complicated spaces. But luckily, working hand in hand with combat design and engineering, we were able to create those really porous environments with all of the greebles and all of those things, and still have the Xeno be able to traverse all of that stuff, floors, walls, ceilings, traverse within the walls and into vents. And so, we're able to, like, at any given point, they could all drop out of the environment and confront you. You could engage with them. Some of them might run back off up into the ceiling and try to flank you and come back around. But we've been able to, and this was the challenge, to create those environments that would allow for that.
That's something we're really proud of, the effect that Tate is describing here. Why are Zenos doing that sometimes? Why did they go away? Sometimes the answer is, I don't know, man. The artists are kind of uncomfortable. He's like, why did they do that? I'm like, I don't know. Because one of the concepts that we follow from the very beginning is I like to reference Conway's Game of Life. It's this mathematical kind of puzzle you learn in programming school, in like CS 101 or something, where there's a grid paper that's saying each time a computer generates a dot randomly, and depending on how many dots got generated next to your dot, you either live or you die. And if you run that simulation out, the craziest complex patterns emerge. Sometimes it looks like a spaceship that travels all around the grid. Other times a whole city appears and another city appears, and then dots will travel to and they die. So essentially, simple rules can create complex outcomes. And that's what we did with the Xenomorph. Essentially, we're like, it can't traverse anywhere. It likes to respond to sound. If a player is clumsy and they knock over a bunch of cups off the table, they'll hear it and they'll come. But they're not going to just spawn them right outside the door like typical in games. Okay, we just spawn some enemies. They just pop in from a vent somewhere and they're searching the environment, and it might see, it might not see. It might be more than one, it might be three, and they might not catch it, they might just leave, and you'll run into it as it was leaving. And that type of simulation, and that creates emergent behavior. Sometimes they do interesting things. I'm like, what is that? I never told him to do that, but he's out there perching, he's hiding, and he's waiting for the player to walk past him. Because that's what the simulation just happened, the way all the rules came together, and that's the behavior.
Yeah, it can be unpredictable. And the only thing you really know is that it just wants to kill you.
Yeah, it's relentless.
And it's going to find ways. So, yeah.
So I'm curious about the design, real quick. Obviously, fans can be very particular on smooth head, shaved head, this one's too thin, tail's too long, that sort of thing. You said the 86 film was the basis. Was that the main thing you looked at? And can you talk maybe about the revision of the final look for what your main aliens look like?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we tried to recreate it as closely as we could. Everything down to the webbed fingers, everything down to the number of ribs. Whether you see the eyes or whether you don't. Surface quality, all of that stuff really sort of was driven by the film and the characters in the film and creatures. So, I mean, that's really what we were trying to do. I mean, there's creativity in that too, in terms of being able to provide maybe a little bit more. I mean, because the film is a man in a suit.
Sure.
So you at least have to make it look not like a man in a suit, and so that's where we spent a lot of our time on the legs and the feet. Maybe thinning it out a little bit because the man in the suit's a little bit chunky. Xenomorph's a little bit more streamlined. So those areas where we just tried to take the practical effects from the film and work them more into the 3D models.
Right, thank you.
I know you were saying the story's not told through like cutscenes because the player is locked in this experience, but how is the story told? Is the player like interacting with other characters in the game, or are they finding logs or stuff like that?
It's all of that. Zula Hendricks arrives on Verdun with her AI companion, Davis 1. So there's a lot of interactions that happen between the two people as they're discovering what really happened on this planet, and they're there to find Zula's friend. Who disappeared and kind of went dark. So that's why in our investigation we're done, and as Zula and Davis 1 are exploring the environment there and uncovering all the secrets, that the conversation between them two and the inner monologue of Zula sometimes is what's telling the story. And while there's not a cutscene in a standard way, there's definitely a VR form of a cutscene that we work on very hard to develop that can help with along the story in a very interesting fashion.
And we do, to a degree, rely on traditional video game tropes, where you communicate a certain amount of information to the player, things like email messages and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's definitely found methods or narrative objects where if you want to get a deeper lore, there's people who can blast through it. But if you're a fan of the franchise, there is a lot for you to find and really figure out background lore, what really happened to the player. So much care went into a lot of stuff that most people don't even know are in the game. What's the ecosystem of this planet? Why is there salt blowing outside? And it was a failed terraforming attempt. And there's a lot of information to discover if you're interested in the world. Yeah, it's under 4, absolutely.
So, Alien Dawson, you think there's a lot of very dark space, and a lot of dark palettes, dark spaces. So how do you balance that with the player being able to kind of see things but not lose that feeling like there's something in the dark?
I mean, that was one of our pillars for the art department was lighting in dark spaces, lighting in bright spaces, and then chaos lighting. And in games, it's my philosophy that you don't ever put a player, especially in VR, in a black room. You have to see something. So even in those dark spaces, we see into the shadows. You have to give the player the opportunity to do that. There are a couple of occasions where we provide the player with a flashlight, and we design those spaces specifically around times where we will need a flashlight. Even in those cases, we want to get a little bit of ambient light into the dark shadows just to give a player boundaries, understanding of sort of where they are in the world. So. Yeah, I mean it is a huge tool to use in games in general, but it's also extremely important in different ways in VR.
I'm sure game devs love this question, but how long would you say it takes to complete?
It depends. It takes me about a day and a half of nonstop play. It might take him like 4 hours.
As much time as somebody will give. In the end, it's an age-old saying, nothing is ever complete. It's cut short. We have to figure out our own scope, given the time we know ahead of time, and how much can we actually do. We want to bring it to the utmost quality to make a short game. Certain decisions have to be made, or we can only do 2 characters instead of 20 characters because we want to make sure they have highest quality, and we need to build time we definitely don't want to crunch the team. We want people to have a healthy working environment.
Yeah, I misunderstood your question. I thought you meant how long would it take you to play through the game?
That's kind of why that was my question.
Oh, through the game. I thought you said develop the game. That's what I thought.
Hey, if I could develop a game in a day and a half, I wouldn't be sitting here. No.
I thought you were just joking. I'm like, all right, I'll go with it. Yeah, the experience is about 8 hours. Yeah, and your typical gameplay. And then if you're a completionist, if you really want to really explore space and get all the background lore that I was talking about, it could take that.
Yeah, if you're a completionist, it'll go a long way.
I'm sure we'll be exploring a bit.
Is it primarily a linear experience, or are there opportunities to kind of branch out and find secret spaces or things like that?
There's definitely opportunity to find secret spaces. In terms of designing the game, there's a golden path, and then we call it the silver path for people who do want to explore. And that's where you find majority of the lore. When you find those secret emails, what happened in this room? There's secondary stories that can be told through the environment. What is this dead body in this room? Like, oh, that's what this person was doing. That's why they're in here.
Yeah, I mean, it is a narrative game, so to a degree we do have to draw the player through the world, but we give tons of opportunity to go off in silver paths.
Are you able to talk about the gear, the weapons, and you mentioned the motion track, you mentioned the pulse rifle, you mentioned flashlight. Are you able to discuss some of the other, are there different weapons or?
Yeah, we have a shotgun, we have a revolver, and because all of that is in VR, each weapon is incredibly unique, not just in the way you handle it. Each one is drastic in the way, for example, you reload it. A pulse rifle, you have to check the clip, grab another one, slap it in, rack the 10, and then all of that feels really kind of incredible for the first time you're holding an actual plasma rifle, and because of the haptics that you talked about earlier, and its look and its size and the way it behaves, it's kind of a magical experience. It's total wish fulfillment. And then you have a revolver where there's a drum that you can flick like a cowboy. There's a shotgun. Each one has a reason to use that best opportunity. Distance, line of sight, how many are around you.
Well, I mean, if you've got the shotgun and you spend it, it's a race to load the shotgun. So you got 8 rounds and you got to get them in there, or as many as you can until the Zeno comes bearing down.
And you physically get to pump the gun. Each one has physicality to it.
And the question, just real quick to that point, how do you balance the physicality, the feel of it with the controls you're working with? Obviously, sometimes the VR can be a little clunky trying to get your hand tracking to adjust appropriately. How do you kind of balance that?
I mean, you hit it on a nail there. It's a lot of trial and error and tuning and figure out. Sometimes you have these great ideas and it becomes overly complicated.
Okay.
And then you want to scale it back, but you still want to have the realism of the weapon. You don't want to abstract too much because there's an ultimate abstraction. It's a button, and the whole thing is your hand comes up and holds it and cocks it, right? there is a whole other way, a simulation of the weapon, and you have to find that happy medium ground where people are enjoying it, but they're not frustrated by it.
We're constantly trying to find where their hands
Yeah,
are supposed to be and that sort of thing.
And sometimes it is, you want that because it's, depending how fast you can reload the weapon is also when should I do it, when I should reload it when there's no xenomorphs around. So that plays into the difficulty of using the weapon. How long is a reload process?
Yeah. Well, and you're also, I mean, you have that sort of frantic search for the weapon you're looking for. Which adds to the tension, which is great.
Is this going to be a survival experience where you have that one bullet and you should I shoot this now or do I need to save it? Or are you going to give the players plenty of ammunition?
Well, there's scarcity. So there is that. You have to. It's not like you have to manage this every second of the game, and we give you cues of sort of how much ammo you have left, and it's all very sort of there in front of you. But we do interject scarcity, and so you do have to be somewhat conservative with how you use your.
You don't want to spray and pray for them. I have a very quick.
They'll get you.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to end there.
Okay.